As the world limps its way out of the global financial crisis, all eyes are on the planet's biggest economy, the United States, which is showing signs of emerging from a long recession. But as in Australia, one area that's still struggling is manufacturing, which has plunged from 26% of the US economy in 1947 to under 12% in 2010. Across America's industrial heartland, towns and workers are trying to retool for a very different world. North America correspondent Michael Brissenden reports.
The season has turned in the US, and this spring has brought with it the much talked about green shoots of economic recovery. On Wall Street, the Dow has hit 13,000 for the first time since 2008, and the president is talking up the growth in jobs.
Hey guys, more companies are bringing jobs back and investing in America.
But how real and how resilient is it? It's clear economic growth is still patchy. Housing starts are showing some promise for the first time in years, but the real growth is in services, in areas like healthcare and high-tech industries like software and communications. Industries not generally as labour-intensive as the old manufacturing. And this recession has brought with it some fundamental change. The nature of unemployment here has changed too.
40% of the unemployed are still unemployed for more than 6 months. The percent of the unemployed, long-term unemployed, is at its highest rate since we've been collecting these data. Over the last 60 years, we have never experienced a decline in our labor force, which we did over the last 2 years.
But in some parts of the country, this economic transition has been going on for decades. The evidence of the long decline in manufacturing in America is scattered all over the country. From the Rust Belt towns of the Midwest across to the once mighty steel towns of the Northeast. Places like Braddock in the Monongahela Valley, just outside Pittsburgh, once one of the greatest steel-producing areas in the world.
When the mills closed in the mid-'80s, that was like it happened somewhat suddenly. You know, they had been sort of closing, layoffs, rolling layoffs, whatever, and they finally, that was it, you know, they're closed. And so people really didn't know fully what hit them. And now I think it's interesting the rest of the country is having those problems.
If part of the story of the recovery from this most recent recession is one of economic transition, then the decline of these once powerful northeastern steel towns is an example of just how long and painful that process can be. The challenge this country faces is what to do with the people and places left behind by the transition. There is still a steel mill here, one of the last in the valley. One worker here now does the job of 10. And for nearly 30 years now, this town has been a crumbling testament to the vagaries of economic change.
Basically, it's a shell of what it used to be.
This is the sort of place that's hardly felt the impact of the last Great Recession. They've been dealing with a downturn here for decades. Before the recession of the early 1980s, 20,000 people lived in Braddock. Walter Wynne was one of them.
Shoe stores, there were hardware stores, any type of thing you wanted, you could get in Braddock. I mean, there's not a bar in Braddock today. And back then, I would have to be 20, 30, 40, 50. You couldn't even lose, you could lose count.
Today, there's less than 2,000 people living in this town. Many of them are the people left behind by the shifting economic current. Walter Wynne can still remember the good times, but there is a generation here with a different view.
In America, people have a historical amnesia about racism and disenfranchisement and how...
Latoya Frazier was born here in 1982, the year things started to turn bad.
I grew up when this library was abandoned and they were struggling to fix it up. The high school is closed and, you know, there's no care for it and it's fallen apart still to this day.
Latoya is a photographer who now lives in New Jersey, but she's taken on a mission to bring some recognition for those she says took the biggest hit.
The core people that are the long-suffering residents that are, you know, my mother's generation, you know, in their 50s and their 60s and their 70s, the real people that endured what happened. I feel an urgency in this transition to archive those voices.
And here in Braddock, that transition is now taking an even stranger tack. It's an approach to Rust Belt renewal that includes embracing depopulation. pushing through red tape and bureaucratic regulations to offer cheap creative space to artists and affordable development opportunities for those brave enough to take it on. And there are literally green shoots appearing in the holes in the main street where the banks and department stores once were.
This is a urban farm. This is a food production site. We're doing about 45 different crops this year.
There's a lot you can do between having a thriving business district and having the vacant, abandoned kind of mess that we've had for the last 20 years.
Laura Zinski is the CEO of the Mon Valley Initiative. She's one of a growing band of locals who are looking for creative ways to turn the corner. Braddock will never be what it was, she says, but it does have a future.
We're kind of a cautionary tale, I think, of like kind of what not to do and things that like don't let that go. Things have changed here now. You know, people are totally ready for a different way of thinking about what Braddock Avenue can be and sort of what the whole town can be.
What Braddock does have now is space. Finally, many of the dead and empty buildings are coming down. What springs up in their place will be different. But some of those who've seen the worst of the transition process know just how hard it can be.
Everything changes. Nothing remains the same. Everything changes. And you either have to adjust to the change, because if you don't, you get left behind.
Michael Brissenden with that report.